In this video, we'll be talking about RobotStudio and Rapid code. So far in class, up to this point, we have been dealing with the virtual teach pendant. Ideally, we'd be dealing with the real teach pendant in the real world, but sometimes that doesn't work. So, the virtual teach pendant is an alternative, or is overall an acceptable alternative to that. And we can do basically everything that we can do with the virtual one that we can do with the real one. So, as you can see, teach pendant, we're controlling it, whatnot. If you want to write code, you'd come to the program editor, and we've got this wonderful little bit here. If we go up in our code, you can see the work objects that we've created and the targets that we've created. So that is kind of nice. Now, writing the code on the teach pendant is kind of a slow and drawn out process. It is completely doable. You can do basically anything. You have access to all of the different commands, and depending on which section you go into and everything else, it's all basically there. But it is kind of a pain in the butt process, in my opinion. All right. So, does it get the job done? Yes. Is it good for on-the-fly, quick little changes like adding one rung or something like that? Yeah, it works just fine. However, for our purposes, if you're going to write code from scratch, it gets kind of annoying. So, we're going to throw the teach pendant out the window. I'm just going to move it to my other screen. And today we're going to be diving into coding on the computer. So you can use the full keyboard just to type out commands and things like that. It's so wonderful. Alright, so to start, we need to go to the Rapid tab at the top. This is where overall RobotStudio's coding is done. On the left-hand controller subsection, we can go down to Rapid, expand our trob1, and then expand main module and double-click on main. And if you notice, that looks basically exactly like what we have on the teach pendant because they are synced. You will also know that by doing that, we jumped back into auto mode. All right, we're not in manual mode anymore. So just something that you need to be aware of, that it is going to jump you around back to auto mode. So fair warning on that aspect. All right. Now, the RobotStudio's SDK, or the programming environment, is actually pretty nice. All right. So if I start typing out a command like move J, if I hit M, every command, everything it knows about, will come up. All right. So it gives you a list of everything that starts with M. So if I then put an O, it obviously shrinks it down, and then a V, it shrinks it down even more. And then if I keep typing, all of a sudden I get to move J. Notice it does give you a little description of what's going on. All right. And then I always like to hit the tab button twice, and that will automatically fill in all the different arguments and parameters and things like that it needs. Now you will notice there is one argument still in red. All right. And that argument there is the location. So we'll just call that P10. All right. And we now made a little program, very, very short program, that will move to P10 using tool 0 with work object 0. All right. Now if we change this work object 0 to brown box, all right, all of a sudden now that code means something completely different, all right, which is really nice. Now, we don't always need to have our work object there, all right? So this is something that is kind of extra that isn't always necessary. So if I go ahead and I do a move J or move L now, move L, tab, let me go ahead and put P20 in, and let me delete this work object here. You'll notice the code isn't yelling at me. And that's because that backslash there is telling us that is an optional argument that isn't always necessary. However, by not putting that on there, I guess I should say, what it's going to use the last work object that was called. So if I go ahead and download this code, and the way we download code is using this apply button up here. Now you will notice that we have a little yellow bar over here on the left. That is saying this is different from what is on the controller. If we look at the controller right now, notice we just have process main SMT. All right, so we don't actually have that code written there. Now, as soon as I press the apply button, that turns green. And then again, if we look at our code, we have that code now on there. So that is very nice. All right. I don't know why over here we have straight up aligned, and then here we have an extra little indent, but that'll be all right. So now here's kind of the annoying part. So if we double click on that, we can bring it out so we can see the robot in the background. And let me just dock that on the side. Hey. There we go. So now I can see my code. I can see the robot. We can do a simulation. Well, let's just, we got to push the motors button to enable the robot. So now the robot, in theory, can move. Turn the simulation on doesn't do anything because I've disabled that. Alright, now that I've fixed the errors that I was having. So, as you can see, we have the robot going on in the background. I can make this a little bit smaller. You can see we have our MoveJ, P10, V1000, Z50, and I changed tool 0 to my tool. I realized that was part of my problem. The robot couldn't physically reach that location using tool 0 because, well, at that point just couldn't reach it. And right now I have work object of the work object again. So I've applied that code, and we can use the start button under the test and debug under Rapid, and you'll see that the robot does a nice loop. Now it's going from the corner closest to the robot basically to the corner farthest from the robot. Now you may be going, okay, what about, I want to change this, make it P30. So we can just change it to P30, and then we can hit apply. Notice we got green now, and we can hit start again. And now the robot's freaking out because P30. Alright. Or you could say, the velocity's too fast. We can change that down too. Let's make the 110. There we go. So we can apply it. Again, hit start. And now we can see it's going back and forth between P10 and P30. So very quick. And I could, add that work object back in here. So we could do a backslash. Oh, task is running. Yeah. Go ahead and stop that. So we could add a backslash work object, and I could add brown box to this. Brown box 1. And then you'll notice how it's different. Right now it's kind of going to this magical point in space over there. And we can hit start. And now it's going to go and make a perfect line down that because we'd saved point 30 in brown box work object. So the hand coding things makes our lives a lot simpler. Alright, it's a lot easier in my opinion to be writing your code and everything over here than it is to be writing it on the teach pendant. Alright, so we don't really need the teach pendant anymore at this point. Now what I will say is if you do something and you're like, okay, how do I do this and this? How do I actually write that code over here because I'm so used to writing it on the teach pendant? You can still write it on the teach pendant. You could still come in here, and I've been known to do this. Put it in manual mode, get the teach pendant out, and say, okay, program editor, and you're like, okay, now how do I make another routine? And I don't remember quite how to do it, so I just be like, okay, file, new routine. Routine 1 is fine. I like to give it at least one parameter just for good purposes. All right. Go back. I can exit out of this now, bring this back to the side, go back into my Rapid, and there we go. I now have process routine 1. So, I didn't quite remember the process for how to create it in the code using my, hand typing stuff. Now I have a nice example there, and I can continue. I could add more parameters. I can rename the routine, whatever it is that you need. So it's really nice in that aspect. The other thing is, if we look on the left here as the robot's running, you'll see a little yellow arrow. And let's bring this out so we can again see the robot. So you can see the robot is moving. So it's basically saying, the arrow is saying, well, we were processing this. Now we're going here. It also now sees the little robot picture. So the robot picture and the arrow are matching up. So it's saying, okay, we're in the process of running this code. You will see that yellow arrow jump before the robot actually moves because it's basically saying, alright, we're almost there. We're getting there. There we go. It says, okay, we're pretty darn close. Let me check what the next command is. The next command is this. Alright, let me load that to be written. And so it actually does overall. They don't always match up, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So, and you can see that on the teach pendant as well as the little arrow and the little robot arm. So that does exist there as well. So that is kind of one of those nice things to know. You also do on the teach pendant have control over speed, so we're actually running at 100% speed right now. If I drop it down to 25, as the arm gets extremely slow. I can go to 0% and it stops. So you do have control over speed if you want it to some extent, but overall, not something we're worried about. So that is the very basics of using the Rapid code editor built into RobotStudio compared to using the teach pendant to write your code. So you can see your work objects at the top, you can see your targets, basically everything is there for you. Alright, let's go ahead and minimize that. Now, one thing you will not see in here, if you notice, is our tool data. I use that tool data called my tool, even though it is not listed in here. And if we look at the program data, alright, my tool is located in calib data, not the base. Alright, and that is the reason why it's not showing up here. So that is up here in this other routine. So if we come in here, we can go and edit and change our declaration. Gotta put it back in manual mode first. We can change our declaration and we can change the module to main module. Go ahead and hit OK. That is fine. And now you will see that our tool data is in here as well. Alright, so just one of those things that you need to be aware of, that you're like, well, why is, where's my tool data? It's not listed at the top. Well, it was just in a different file is what it comes down to. We don't need that file anymore at all, actually, so we can completely delete that one. No. Alright, anyway, so we've talked about tool data, we've talked about robot targets or work objects. I did post a website on D2L for talking about Rapid data itself. And what that's talking about is different variables. So we have persistent variables, we have constant variables, which if you notice we have PERS here, we have CONST here. So there are some different options. There's also the scope of the data, whether it is for subroutines or globally accessible or things like that. So it's something else to be aware of. So make sure you go read that website. Anyway, so we can create a variable up here and we can call it num, and then we can call it whatever we want. We call it loop num. And then you do colon equals, and we would say, I don't know, 0, and then a semicolon. And I realized I missed the there in front of that for variable first. Alright, so very easy way there. Now, if you wanted to figure out what loop you were on, we could just do loop num down here, colon equals, and then you would do loop num again, plus 1, semicolon. And that will now, in theory, keep track of how many times we have looped. So I've got my code running now. If we look at my variable number data on the remote, we can see that right now it says 8, but that's because we haven't refreshed it recently. So we're up to 36, 37, so every time I click, it will be updating that value because I just have that looping basically indefinitely. So something to be aware of. We will be getting into loops and things like that, so that way we can actually start doing the blocks where you only have to tell it one location and it does all of the rest of the work for you. So that is it for this video.